Okay, so this video is going to be kind of maybe not that different if you've been on this channel for like long enough, but I'm actually going to talk for a second. It's just going to be kind of a short rant about whiteness and how can we put this? Whiteness and money. Um okay. There's been a lot. If you study like anthropology or anything like that, then you will probably be at least somewhat familiar with eugenics and what the study of eugenics is. And it's basically this like field of biology that tries to get down to like a genetics level and prove that some races are better than other races. So we know that like race is a social construct, but what that means is like socially the way that people are interacting, like people make decisions about how to move in society, like who to date, where to live, where to work, who to be friends with, who to not be friends with. Like all of those things are like decisions, social decisions that people make, right? And a lot of people made those based on race and class because they like wanted to like only live around certain type of people or only interact with certain type of people, and there are reasons for that, and I would say some of the reasons are valid. um Others are just racist. Now I just see a there it's kind of funny to watch some stuff like happen in Africa specifically, like all the stuff that's happening in Egypt where people are filing lawsuits and talking very deeply about Cleopatra being Greek but then being Egyptian. Um I'm not really sure like what everyone is trying to prove here. There's like a lot of chitter chatter about uh you know I guess Cleopatra being like one woman who had quite a lot of like power and influence over men. True, yes, she did. This is very true. But like she's not like the only woman I would say like probably Marilyn Monroe or like Paris Hilton have had more, I would say, like cultural influence globally than Cleopatra. Um, and those women are still alive, or Kim Kardashian, okay? Like, and those women are like still alive. Beyonce, okay? Like, I mean, Cleopatra is not the baddest, and also she's not very attractive. So, anyway, but the point is, I think if you want to start thinking about racism and really like to be more clear, like whiteness, I think it's important to just start in places like Germany, where if you actually go, I don't know why, but I've just for some reason like a lot of places I go, I always run across German men, and they literally all look the same. And when I say that, I'm not joking. Like they're all really tall. They all have like blue eyes. They're like very pale. Their faces are all they're very symmetrical. And like even if you're talking about like the type of food that they eat, go talk to a German dude and like just be like, oh, like what's your favorite meal? And they'll all be like schnitzel, and they'll like they're just very similar. They're pretty like bland, right? But they have like a whole country. They have a whole culture. Like it just works, right? It just works for those white people, like German white people. Now, this is America, right? But we also have this kind of thing about Aryans, right? And like traditionally, Aryans are from like Germany. There's a whole thing about you can go read about the Holocaust and like Nazis and things like that. But the big idea was like amongst white people, they wanted to like separate inferior genes from superior genes. So they said like certain people who like look like this and who are tall and who are attractive, we want them to be a part of like the air. They just made up a group. Like first it was like all the people who are living there, right? And they were all like white, but then they said now we want to have a different group. We're going to call them the Aryans, and now we the Aryans are now superior amongst. This has nothing to do with like black people are still all the way in Africa. This is like this has to do with like Europe, right? This particular story. Okay, so what they're saying is like I think you guys don't understand like what the underclass of white people are. In that group, there's like obviously Jews, which Jews are like a religious group, but also I think genetically they're kind of similar as well. Like they always tend to look very similar. Like they're very short, they're very like hairy. Um, at least from what I've seen. Like I've never seen a German look like a Jew. And I've seen a lot of Germans, seen a lot of Jews. Look for yourself. Let's see if this actually applies, right? Or like another group that was kind of a little bit marginalized, like Italians. For a very long time, Italian people were not considered white. They were considered like white trash, like very low on the spectrum. This is why they have all those like crime like every story, kind of in the beginning of America about the Italian group, it's always about a crime story. And that's because like those white people were like really segregated into like poor housing constructs and didn't have access. I don't know if they were allowed to go to college, so they didn't have access to professional careers like the men didn't. So how are they going to make money outside of like crime? So that's why in the Italian culture, a lot of the old movies are about crime, which a lot of black people seem to like idealize. Like you always see people with like, what is it, The Sopranos? Like black people always talk about that, The Sopranos, or what is that one movie, the mafia movie? People always have, black men always have like T-shirts of this, which I think is really funny. Like I don't know, just prioritizing crime over everything else. Nothing new here. Anyway, so the big idea around whiteness, though, and the reason why it's kind of important is just because amongst white people, and I think actually a really good instance of this is watching what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. I think people keep thinking, calling me mean. Like I've gotten this from a lot of like white people. They're like, "Oh my God, you're just so insensitive. I can't believe you'd actually say this. You're so mean." But and I'll say this before, like powerful rich men will have things, including beautiful women. Now you can sit on the other side of that computer and you can be like, "Oh, Olivia's not beautiful," or Olivia's a this, or Olivia's that. You like, so all the beautiful women, you guys can be like, Halle Berry's so ugly. Oh, Beyonce's a hag. Like all these things that you can say, you can be like, wow, 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 right? The reality is, beautiful women probably at this point know that they're beautiful. First of all, okay. First of all, secondly, they will always have a place in society, and that society is typically the one where the rich men are. I don't know why. It's just, that's just like how it works, right? And so what's happening in Ukraine right now, like the Ukrainians are like the Jews, and like what's happening in Russia is kind of like, or in Ukraine is like the Holocaust, literally. And we're all like watching it happen, which is like crazy. But like Putin has been rich and powerful for a minute. And Russia, as much as we like, Russia has been making power moves for quite some time. They've just been kind of like doing it on the low low. Like if you watch any of the um like the BBC news, watching like global news and what's happening and shit, like Russia's been on the low trying to strike all type of deals with like Africa like for a while. This is like not new. Like it's like every time there's like the group of people in the UN who are like a part of the peace groups, like Russia is literally on the op side. They're like, nah, we're not down with none of that shit. Like every single meeting, if y'all have been paying attention to this at all, if you study, go study like global relations in a minute. Like Russia is like always on the like villainous side of history. And I'm not really mad because I feel like just about the way I feel about the world right now, I'm on the villainous side too. So okay, so let's keep going with this. So the point is, the Ukrainians at this point are the poor white people. In turn, Russia wants the land. I feel like I keep saying this, but like Russians want to have Putin specifically. I don't think that all Russians feel this way. I don't even think most Russians feel this way. But also, I don't think that most Russians politically understand kind of how marginalized they are globally, and probably like Putin is trying to save his people, which do not include Ukrainians at this point. And the reason that is necessary is because like there's a lot happening in Europe. I'm not going to take you through like European history. You can go study that on your own. But like Russia has its own land right now, which is like land occupied primarily by like Russian white people, and they need that land to continue to have white people. I've said this and I'll keep saying it, but like most people on planet Earth are either black in Africa or they're Asian in Asia. And most, like, it's like 60 or 70% of those people are just brown people who are a very similar shade to me or darker than me. So it's like more than half of the planet. This is why I continue to say, like, black women, if you just want to make content, you absolutely should, because like 3/4 of the world is your audience. Like, white people are actually like the marginalized group here, which is why they have to be like overrepresented in like media and television shows and movies and shit, because they're kind of like actually fighting for their lives, like actually. But in terms of like Europe, so basically I feel like what's happening in Russia right now, or in Ukraine, excuse me, is like Russian people are seeing that they have fertile land. Like that's a lot of land that can be occupied to grow crops and like feed Russian people for for the next couple of centuries. They need that land. Like they need the land. Like for sure. They need the crops. Like if they want they can't, where are they going to import the crops from? There's nowhere else for them to import it from. Like Africa's growing. Africa's going to have to feed Africa. America's going to have to feed America. Like Europe is going to have to feed Europe. Like everyone has to feed themselves. And like Russia is also thinking about that and making real plans. Anyway, so the point, to go back to America for a second, the point why whiteness in America is important is because it's about really slavery, and not that I'm not gonna go back and just be like, oh, all the black people are slaves, are all slaves, all black people are slaves, and that's not the point. But it is the point that like most of the black people in the country did actually start out as slaves, and the white people here were not. They were like landowners. They were also poor white people, but not, I think, well, actually, most of the white people were poor white people, but a significant number were like wealthy landowners. And that means that they had land and resources, and they were able to use the money that they made from slavery to invest in businesses and really build the America that we see today in terms of like free market capitalism. Like they were able to fucking build free market capitalism. Like first there was slavery, and then they kind of like used the dividends from slavery to make free market capitalism. So when people keep talking about like a 500 year head start, that's what the fuck they're saying. Like they've actually had 500 fucking years to prepare to get here. And like black people who were slaves just didn't have that. We're like just starting at like literacy now. Like literacy rates are way down. Like abortion is way up. We're like a lot of black Americans are going backwards, but I don't actually know if this is going to make even a dent in the bucket, just because there's so many people in Africa who could just come over in like 1 second that it would just kind of be like it doesn't really matter. That's the point here. Now that was kind of like a long-winded, that wasn't very organized, and I'm not interested in organizing thoughts on this video right now. But maybe later I will. And then if you have questions about this topic, or if you think this topic is interesting, comment on this video, and I can kind of break down these topics a little bit more. But I think it is an interesting topic that I just kind of want to summarize it like in my own words for some people who might not be familiar with that, and just understand simply the way that like whiteness ties to resources. But also, I also want to give one more caveat that like it is very funny to see like Asian people or like Armenian people, all these other groups, Italian people. Now like everybody wants to be white. They just want to like classify themselves as white. And it's kind of ridiculous. Like when I see people talk about how Rosalia is white, I've seen a lot. Like Rosalia is not white. In terms of what America considers white, she is not. Rosalia is not Aryan. Aryan is white. Everything else kind of trickles down from there. There's a lot of other groups. There's the Latin Spaniards, which is what like Rosalia is. People were commenting to me that she's from Spain. Yeah, that's not Aryan. It isn't. I'm not saying that she's bad. I'm not saying she's less than or anything. I'm simply saying that she's like something else. And there's a lot of something else, right? Like I am East African and American. Okay, you could be like Nigerian. You could be Egyptian, North African. You could be like Indian, like a brown Indian. You can be like a pale Asian, like a Chinese person or a Japanese person. Like all of those things are different. All of those are like kind of like different ethnicities and like racial identities. But it's weird because I feel like everyone is just trying to think of shit as like black and white. There really is like Aryans and Africans. Like that's a real thing. Like those are the black and white people. But if you're not a part of one of those groups, like the really all of the topics about race don't in America don't really concern you. Like I just don't see like Latin Americans having a place in the conversation, or like Asian Americans or all the North Africans who are like now just talking about how like Cleopatra's not black. Okay, but also Cleopatra doesn't it doesn't feel like she's white either. Like so like what the she's from like North if she really is from like Egypt, like I don't know any white Egyptians, do you? And I've been to like North Africa, so I don't think Cleopatra was an Aryan. Uh it's just so strange to hear people talk about race, bro. Like but I think as time moves forward a little bit more, I think we will really be able to see kind of like a who's who, because there's like a real portion of land ownership that we're seeing play out where like you're just starting to see more and more people from like real tribes, okay, in Africa, real tribes in Europe, real tribes in Russia, like wherever. Like people are actually from those places, like, and they can tell you like what the culture is like because they've been there for like hundreds of years, not just like 10.